All right, we're here with James H. Jennings. It is November 25th, 2013, and we're at the Licking County Library, the Newark location. This is Doug Stout doing the interview. James, where were you born?
I was born in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay, and what was your birth date?
6/7/40.
Okay, and when did you come to Licking County?
About 2000. My son went to Ohio State and married a girl from Pennsylvania and settled here, and they had grandchildren, so we moved down here after I retired.
Okay, and you went in the service what date?
In the middle of 1963.
Okay, and did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted.
Okay, and did you get to pick which branch of service you went in at
No.
that point, or they just told you?
Wherever they needed bodies, that's where you went.
Okay, up in Cleveland, what did your parents do for a living?
My dad worked at TRW as well. My mother was a homemaker.
Okay, you have siblings or?
No, only child.
Okay, before you entered the service, were you in school or?
I was working. Working as a tire salesman, and I had just gotten married in March of '63, and got drafted. I think it'd come out about June.
About time for your birthday, huh?
Yes.
How old were you?
23.
So when they drafted you, where did you end up doing your basic training?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Okay, and what was that like? Did you adapt well to military?
Adapting wasn't the hard part. The area, they called it Little Korea. Rocks and scrub trees. The training wasn't that all strenuous. It pretty straightforward.
Had you traveled a lot before you went in the service? I mean, or were you used to being away from home, or?
Well, not really. We traveled a lot as a family before I got married. We traveled all over the United States, but after I got married, didn't have much time to get anything started.
Right. So from basic training, where did you end up going from?
I went from Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri to Fort Carson, Colorado. It's just south of Colorado Springs.
And what training did they?
That was advanced infantry training.
Okay. And you were telling me that you did some desert training there?
We went out, we did desert training. Did that for, I guess maybe 3-4 weeks. And then we came back and I did amphibious training in California with the Navy. And that was fun. It was better than being in Fort Carson, Colorado when it was snowing.
What was your job in the military at that time? Did you have a specific duty?
I was an infantryman.
That's it.
That's it.
Infantryman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then you ended up going to Korea?
Went to Korea. That was in June of '64.
And if you can share with me that story that you told me about how you had to, how you got there, and
we went across the Pacific in a rather large ship, the USS Breckenridge. You slept in what they called a hole. They hung bunks on chains about every 3 feet. There was probably 6 to a stack, and there was probably, I'd say maybe 100 or better in each hole. And you worked every other day. My job on the ship was food breakout, so I'd get a list from the chef, and I'd go down into the reefers and get whatever he wanted and bring it up to the mess kitchen, and they'd prepare the food then. We worked every other day, and it took about 23 days to go across. We first stopped in Yokohama, Japan. Going across, we blew a boiler at, I guess we were about 2/3 the way across. And that's when they had the big uprising in Vietnam. And we picked up a 2-destroyer escort and took us all the way into Yokohama, Japan, where they repaired the boiler. Then we went south around Japan and around the tip of Korea, up the far side in the Yellow Sea to a platform. Like, they have very high tides over there, like 30 feet, and you can't bring a big ship into the dock. So they have this floating platform anchored out there, and everybody gets off on this platform, and then you load into the small landing craft, which takes you to the beach.
Okay. And you said that they picked out everybody that was over 6 foot for...
Everybody that was over 6 foot and was infantry went to 8th Army for tryout for honor guard.
And you said you ran into your first leave?
Yes, the first sergeant from the unit that I rotated from had rotated like 2 to 3 months before I did. And the night before we went up to the tryout for honor guard, I met him in the club, and he told me what to expect and what to do and what not to do. Good information, because it saved me a whole lot of grief.
So then he found you something else to do, right?
He got me an interview with the division surgeon in the 1st Cav. I was scheduled to go to the 1st Cav in a line unit, and so he got me this interview with the 1st Cav division surgeon, and it just so happened that the man I talked with was the MSC officer, was a major, and he was from Dayton, Ohio. And when we both got to talking about Ohio State football, that kind of cinched up the job.
Well, that's good then. And so then your job there was to do...
I did office work, I did driving, I did dispensary work, whatever they had to do. There was only about 5 of us in that office, so you pretty much had to do just about everything.
What were your living quarters like?
We were in Quonset huts, probably 30 or so guys in a we called it a hooch, and they were just steel round top buildings. Served the purpose.
You were over in Korea for how long then?
1 year.
1 year. So you got to experience a Korean winter.
Yes.
And what was that like?
The winter wasn't bad. Going into winter was worse when you had the monsoons.
Okay.
The winters over there were rather cold because it was damp, and it was more of an icy condition rather than a snowy condition. You did get some snow, but not that much.
Tell me about the USO show that you told me about that you got the pictures of.
Bob Hope brought his USO show to Korea, and we sat out. It was probably 25 degrees out there, and watched the show. You couldn't turn that down.
Right. And you showed me in the pictures the girls, I mean, they weren't bundled up at all.
No. I don't know what they had to drink or eat or whatever, but they must have found some way to stay warm because they didn't have just a common dress on to what we could see.
Was it hard staying in touch with people back home, staying in touch with your wife for that, or was it?
No. We had mail call every day, and we had a mailbox where we can drop a letter in anytime we can walk by it.
Could you ever call home?
No, I never did. We had they had these rec centers, and in the rec center, they had ham radio operators, and we could send messages home. They'd send it from Korea to somebody close to where your folks lived or your wife lived, and then they in turn would relay the message by telephone.
Okay. So did you do that much, or?
Well, a few times, but we had like 38,000 men over there. And, they're busy.
Okay, yeah. I lost my train of thought. You've told me so many things before we started recording that I want to make sure that we cover. You were a driver,
Yes.
and you told me you ended up you would have to take people for talks at the Parallel.
No, they had talks up there. My people weren't involved
Okay.
exactly with the talks, but we went up there. We were allowed to come in and view the area and the buildings. The buildings there was probably 4 long buildings. 2 of them were green and 2 of them were blue. The green was the north and the blue was the UN buildings of the south. And the 38th parallel ran right down through the middle of the table on the full length of the 4 buildings. When the north would come in, there was 2 flags on the table, and their flag would be a half-inch taller than ours, just as a propaganda thing. And when they'd come in, they'd take their chairs and crank them up as high as they could get them so that they would look down on us. That also was a propaganda.
And you told me about a building that was just north there.
Yeah, they had a hill just north of the area where the buildings were, and they called that the ice cream parlor, and that was always manned by the North guards, and they had a couple GIs that went up there and defected.
Okay. And then you were telling me about how they would take their tractors.
Oh, when you looked north over what we called the area of no return, they had beautiful tractors and farm equipment, and they would grow beautiful crops there. That was the only place you could find that in North Korea. And they had a hole in the mountain there, and they would drive trucks in the backside of the mountain. They would put designation on the bumper, or what we could see, and then they'd drive them out. Well, they did run them around, and they'd bring them in the backside and repaint them. And then that was another propaganda
To look like they had a lot of materials they're moving.
buildup.
You talked to me about an orphanage that was over there, and you guys would go visit that.
There was a great deal of GI babies over there that nobody wanted. And there was an orphanage over there started by a man in the States, and it was called Pockeye Orphanage. And the kids, they didn't get CGIs too often. We'd go over there though and play baseball with them and roughhouse with them a little bit and give them a little touch of our side of life.
Did you ever keep in contact with any of those kids, or
No.
probably wasn't any chance to
No.
do that? Do you know of anybody that ever adopted one out of there?
No, I did not.
I just wondered if there were any kind of bonds that were made during that time, or.
There possibly could have been. I wasn't connected with anybody that did it.
Okay, so you were over there for a year. So then what happened after? Had you finished your service?
My tour was over when I came back to the States. We flew from Kimpo, which is south of Seoul, to California by way of Alaska, up and over the top and down. when we got to California, they said that it was Friday and it was late in the day and they'd have to keep us for the weekend, and we'd get out on Monday. Well, that wasn't going to happen. So 4 of us got a taxi and we got our gear and we headed for the depot where we could muster out, and we mustered out and we were home by 4 of them other guys got loose.
When you got out, did you have to drive? I mean, find your own transportation back to Cleveland, or did you take a bus or
airplane?
Got an airplane?
Airplane, yes. You flew, as long as you were in uniform, you flew standby.
So you didn't have to pay for it?
Well, you paid, but it was basically maybe the tax.
Well, that's nice. I mean, that's the right thing to do.
Yes.
You've got tons of pictures and tons of newspaper clippings that you had. Is there anything, if you could leave one thing that you want somebody to listen to this and get out of it? You do a lot of work in schools and that sharing with kids. And that's hard to say what one thing, but is there one thing that you really want people to remember about your service and the time that you were there?
Their way of life was so different than ours. The people that we had contact with, it was hard to explain to them. They called the United States the land of the big PX, and that's what they got some of our magazines over there, and they see those pictures in that, and they couldn't at that time. They couldn't believe it. Now I've talked with one of my friends, married a Korean girl, and he took her back over there a few years ago, and she looks at my pictures and she looks at the pictures of today, and she says it's completely different, that they have come a long way to be westernized.
Would you like to go over and visit again, or?
I don't believe so. I have so many things I want to see in this country that I haven't seen. I think I'd rather spend my time here.
Is there a story or something that I haven't asked you that, like I say, we went over so much with your pictures that I want to make sure I've got everything that...
I don't believe. Don't know of anything I'd rather bring out.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you doing this. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.